Hello there, I'm the Biblical Translator, and I wanted to talk to you today about being quick to listen, or quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. In other words, be quick to pay attention and listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And I had an experience today where that scripture from James 1:19 just popped up at me. And it was because I'd received a statement from my council, not council, what do you call them? Housing association, because I'm in shared ownership. And they'd increased the service charges. So I didn't know they'd increased it at the time. I just saw something that said, oh, there's an adjustment that's been made to your account. And I wasn't sure whether or not it was them putting money into my account because they'd overestimated, or whether I had to pay them. So I was kind of concerned because I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to pay for my MOT and I've got to pay for my service of my car, which I'd already planned for tomorrow. And sometimes all these things happen at once. So I was a bit concerned. So I called I called a couple of people on the close to see if they'd received the same letter. They'd all received it. They all had the same concerns. So I drafted up some notes to do this video, and how James 1:19, quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, relates to my situation. And it's crazy, isn't it, that something written in the first century can apply to us today in the 21st century. So yeah, let me just go to my notes so I don't go over time. So what does this mean? Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. James 1:19. I received a letter from my housing association today that notified me of adjustments made to my service charges, because I didn't understand whether it meant they had overestimated and therefore putting money back into my account, or whether the service charges had been increased. It did not occur to me that the charges might be wrong until I spoke to another owner on the close who said he was going to challenge it because he didn't use any of the services listed. I was simply trying to work out whether they were giving me money back or taking money out of my account. The statement wasn't particularly clear to me, so when I realised it was an increase, I decided to read the letter properly. Up until that point, I hadn't read the letter in detail, so I didn't realise that there were services that may not apply to me and that I could challenge them. And whilst I was anxious about the increase, I now wondered how I was going to challenge it in a diplomatic way. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry came to mind. I recalled that the scripture didn't say stay calm. It describes a way of responding, one that can be practiced and can birth wisdom. To be honest, the process of writing is often therapeutic for me in so many ways. What James 1:19 suggests is what I do without consciously knowing that's what I'm doing. The process of trying to communicate with patience and diplomacy is in fact reflected in slow to respond, or even quick to listen. This doesn't always come naturally to me, and sometimes it can take me a couple of hours to get the tone of the communication in a way that I feel will land right and will not offend. I'm not somebody who looks for arguments. If I owe money, I pay for it. I don't like getting into disputes, and I certainly don't like causing unnecessary conflict. The more I thought about it, the more I realised I was quite happy to pay for the things that genuinely applied to where I live, like the maintenance of the communal green spaces and the estate lighting. What I wanted to understand was why I was apparently being charged for lifts when there are no lifts, communal cleaning when there are no communal buildings, and retirement living costs when there are no retirement accommodation, and several other services that don't appear to exist where I live. So I guess I wanted to understand whether the generic letter, which seemed to apply to a block of flats, could be charged to my property. Once again, I reflected on James 1:19, swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. In other words, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. I'd heard that verse so many times over the years. Usually I think about it in the context of relationships. We should listen to each other. We shouldn't interrupt people. We should be patient. But this time I realised it applied to how we respond to situations. In my opinion, being quick to listen doesn't only mean listening to another person, it can also mean listening to the facts before we decide what we think and how to respond. Similarly, being slow to speak doesn't mean staying silent. It means taking enough time to understand the situation before responding. And likewise, being slow to anger could mean not allowing our emotions to make decisions before our minds have got into gear. In that moment, I realised that there were actually three possible responses to that letter. So the first was to assume the housing association must be right, which is what I thought. The second was to assume that they must be wrong, which was the other homeowners' thought. And the third was simply to ask, could you help me understand why these charges have applied to my property? Now, notice the order in James 1:19, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. It's almost the reverse of how many difficult conversations come about. Often we become angry first. We speak second and only listen if we are forced to. In the Bible, James turns that upside down. So the way I relate to James 1:19 is that in sorting through the facts in that statement is being quick to listen. Having the patience to draft a response based on the facts could be considered being slow to speak. I may be grasping at straws here. And because the process of drafting helped me to put things into context and perspective, it meant I did not react or get angry because I was allowing my words to catch up with my thoughts. In other words, I'd been quick to listen, slow to speak. There was no impetus to get angry. It was simply a desire for clarity. I guess you could say that was me wanting to listen to understand before complaining. And while they referred me to the lease, we all know how long and complex leases are. Some of us can express ourselves brilliantly and still not be understood. So I try to be particularly careful that by editing and phrasing, it doesn't weaken the message and only removes barriers to understanding. Once I realised that the amount would automatically be taken out of my account because I pay my rent by direct debit, I could also have made an angry phone call. But I guess my thing is I like disputes in writing. So in this situation, I paused, gathered information, and did just that. I put it in writing. Because the thing with shared ownership is that you have a mortgage that you've either paid off or some people are still paying, and then you have the rent element. And the rent element and the service charges is what bumps up your monthly payments. So that's why it's crucial. When you get an increase, it's an overall increase. So perhaps the next time you get a letter that makes you angry, remember James 1:19 and put together a simple sequence that says, read carefully, ask questions and seek understanding and then respond. Because just supposing I'd understood that that money was automatically coming out of my account and I wasn't using any of those services, my response might have been totally different because I just automatically thought that it was correct. I didn't even look at the list of services. So sometimes it is good to kind of look at the details, take your time. It does say quick to listen, be quick to get the facts, be quick to investigate. And then when you've got the facts, then you might be slow to respond. And if you're slow to respond and then you seek clarity, if you're seeking clarity, you could eliminate anger altogether. It's only when there's lack of clarity and you feel as though you're being misunderstood or someone's taking advantage while it ends up in anger. And some people say, they might disrespect me. So that